There's something happening here. What it is ain't exactly clear.
We're here with our Stewart Perry, and we are Lexington Behind the Curtain. And Stewart, the reason for the podcast is about 22, 23 years ago, I was with you and 250 other Lexington business leaders, and we did a fly-in to Washington, D.C. And the first day, the opening remarks, we're looking around the community. We got bankers and politicians and other leaders of various groups. And I realized, then I'm in my mid-20s, and I realized, Lexington's got a population of about 500,000 people in our metro area, but the 250 people in that room were really who's moving this town, So my intent of the podcast is kind of shine a light on good people doing great things. And, you were in that room with me that day, and, I've known you, I think, since the late 90s, maybe, so about 25 years. And I don't know if you know.
You do realize you're still 20 years old to me, Chuck. You do realize that.
Yeah. Well, I don't know if you realize the impact you've had on me in numerous phases of my life. My father died when I was really in my early 20s, so I haven't had a mentor. So I've looked to people that I respected in the community and listened to them and let them be maybe an unofficial mentor. And, I once called you the kingmaker because, you came to me early on when I was on the board of the Lexington Forum, and you said, hey, me and a couple of other longtime members have been talking, and we really like you, and you're doing some good stuff. We'd like you to run for president of the Lexington Forum. And at that time, I thought I was way too young because Malcolm Jennings was president at that time, and he was probably 60 at that point. You supported me, and long story short, I ended up being the president of the forum that next year. And it was an extremely rewarding part of my life. So I want you to know that I've watched you over the years, and I know you've mentored me in many ways, but I've watched you mentor countless others, and it's almost your superpower. You're mild-mannered insurance agent by day, and then nonprofit ninja by night. And you've just got the heart of a mentor. So I really appreciate it. And that's why I'm very thrilled that you're the second guest to be on our podcast.
If I was your mentor, Jamie, I would have hoped you turned out a lot better. You did, but I'm sorry.
Yeah.
You could have found much better people to get mentored by that would have made you much more successful.
I'm not going to say who it is, but I've got somebody in mind that I'm reaching out to 4 or 5 episodes from now that ended up being a mentor of mine who didn't like me very much. And we served on a board, and he, over time, griped at me about certain things that I was doing that as I got a little more mature, I was like, he's right. So I plan on interviewing him.
Sounds like either Ralph or Larry Smith, one of the two.
What's funny is, Ralph and I served on the board of the Dream Factory forever. And of course, I was president of that board as well.
And I was one of the founders.
Well, yeah, I was going to ask you that because I think you and Ralph both were one of the founders, right? Mm-hmm.
We all wrote a check for $50 a piece to get it started.
I bet it would be easier for you to list the nonprofits you haven't been involved with than to list all the ones you have.
Could be.
Yeah, because I know just in the time that I've known you, you've almost always been on 2 or 3 boards at the same time. It's definitely your passion.
I think I'm on 6 or 8. I can't remember.
When my girls got old enough to start school, I pulled back on all that because I work 60 plus hours a week. Sure. And, my girls are now 13 and 17. And speaking of mentors, 2.5 years ago, my youngest daughter was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes. And, we didn't realize that she was sick. We knew something was wrong, couldn't put our finger on it. And she ended up going into a diabetic coma while they were in Hazard visiting family. And Haley calls me from the ambulance. And, my daughter's unresponsive. They don't, at that point they figured it out, right? They tested her blood sugar. They pretty much knew what was going on. But Stewart, I almost died 3 or 4 times in my life. I flipped a couple of cars. I got electrocuted one time and thrown 10 feet across the room. I'm a big, strong man. There's not a lot that scares me. I was terrified talking to my wife in that ambulance with my daughter in coma.
And you still are.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. We had a moment last night,
Still are.
Every day,
Jamie, there's now, this has been a paid political announcement by Stewart Perry, but this is, there is now, you should have her siblings as well as yourself and your wife tested.
Yeah.
There's a test for type 1 diabetes, and there's some new therapies now that can prevent. And I want you to think about that. If you could have prevented for a year, 2 years, the onset of that,
for sure,
what that would have done to allow you to get ready if it ever did come back, and who knows, there may be a prevention by the time that happens. So So there's a lot of new things going out in diabetes, and we could spend the entire time talking about diabetes if you wanted to.
So the first person outside of my immediate family when we got out of the hospital that I called was Stewart Perry. You know, I needed to know. I mean, of course, I know, you know, you're an encyclopedia of diabetic knowledge, but you know, I needed somebody to tell me it was going to be okay. You know, and I was sitting on my back patio of my house, and we talked for a little over an hour that evening, and it definitely helped me to find my center. You know, so when I say you're a natural mentor, I mean it. You know, I mean it's definitely been.
That's very kind.
It's been a pleasure to know you for sure.
That's very kind.
So in all of your doings, all of your involvement in different organizations, do you have one that you step back and say, you know, that was my crowning achievement? I mean, you're not done, right? But for the sake of this podcast, looking back over your last.
You know, Jamie, that's a hard question to answer because you have to put them in segments of what I do. You know, I do a lot of things community-based. I do some stuff that's in my business-based. I was president of the Life Underwriters Association here locally at one time. I do a lot of stuff diabetes.
Right.
And if I had to say my crowning achievement, it would be Larry Smith, who lives here in Lexington, of course. Larry Smith and I co-founded a diabetes group that I'm now president of, chairman of. Larry was chairman. That is doing fantastic work called the Diabetes Leadership Council. It had a different name when we started it. Nobody liked it but me, so they ended up changing it. But it now employs 8 or 9 people and does a budget of a couple $1 million.
Oh, wow.
And we started it 10 years ago, 11 years ago in 2013, along with a lot of other people who were former leaders of the American Diabetes Association. So if you had to ask me something that I've seen that we formed from an idea and have grown it to where it is now. Of course, if you ask my wife, who's also my business manager, she'll tell you that I'm a part-time insurance agent, a full-time diabetes volunteer.
Yeah.
But you know, that might very well be because I feel like it was Larry that came up with the idea, shepherded it, and grew that seed into what it is now, a strong tree. I mean, I've been on the board of Equestrian Events Incorporated, which is the organizer of the now Defender Kentucky 3-day event. Used to be the Rolex Kentucky 3-day event. I've been on that board since 1994, along with Ralph Kohler. And, you know, that organization is huge now.
Oh, yeah.
It brings 80,000 people into this community.
What did the World Equestrian bring in that year?
I cannot tell you. I really don't remember. But
insane.
it doesn't have. It had a huge economic impact to this community, but we've had an economic impact every single year. It was a one-off.
Right.
We've had an economic impact every single year. And, you know, I'm a great believer in trickle-down economics. You know, if somebody comes in for a basketball tournament and spends money, then somehow it's going to affect my business. The same with yours.
Absolutely.
You know, so I believe in trickle-down economics. So, you know, my dad taught me this as a young man in 1982, 83, 84. My father was on the city council, and and he was always involved in the church, and I was too. Served on every single board in the church, and so he taught me that giving back to the community. So I started in the 80s doing it, and met a group of great friends now, and we've done these things for many years, and it was like the 4th of July parade. You know, I've done the 4th of July parade for so long I can't remember.
See, I didn't know that. I knew that Ralph was involved in that, but I didn't know you.
Ralph and I used to trade back and forth as to who was the chair, and finally we just made Ralph chair. This last year, the Christmas parade, George Milligan called me and said, I need you to run the Christmas parade. I'm going to be out of town. So I didn't realize he was calling. I didn't realize it until I got the call that the Christmas parade was 3 days. I got a call on Thursday. The Christmas parade was on Saturday, and I went, uh-oh.
Yeah.
So I had to call a group of people and get them and say, hey, I need you to come marshal the parade. They did it. It went off without a hitch. You know.
Well, when you've given back to so many, it's easier to ask for some return. I mean.
Oh, it costs you.
Oh, it does.
It costs you.
I mean, there's a price for everything.
But, you know, Jamie, this is a great community.
It's fabulous.
You
I love
didn't
Lexington.
grow up here.
No, I grew up in Shepherdsville.
Shepherds.
Came here in '93 to go to EKU.
I grew up here.
Yeah.
You know, I went to Tates Creek High School. I went to Stonewall Elementary, Jesse Clark Junior High School.
Yeah.
Went to UK. You know, I grew up here. I moved here in 1959, the late 58, 59. If I was ever little, that's when I was small.
Yeah.
And so I grew up here. I've seen this town grow. I've seen the good things it's done. I've seen the bad things it's done.
So and that was one of my questions. What do you think is the most positive change you've seen in Lexington in your tenure? If you had to put a, you know, hey,
Well,
this, that, what have you.
I'm a business person. So, you know, the opportunities for business here has been positive.
Yeah.
It's a great community. You own a business here. It's a great community to do business in.
You know, it's funny. I've got a coaching group that helps me, you know, best practices with my business. And we're going over our profit and loss report at the end of December, beginning of January. And he's going through the line items, talking to me. And he goes, how are you categorizing your advertising money? And I said, well, it's right there on the P&L, that advertising line. And he goes, well, where's the rest of it? And I said, no, I mean, that's all we spent that month on advertising. And he said, do you realize for a business of your size, you should be spending 10 to 15% of your gross revenue on marketing, and you're spending less than 2% of your revenue?
I'm not.
He asked me, he said, how are you spending less than 2%? I said, we're 80% referral.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, 80% of our new and renewed business is either existing customers or existing customers sharing, because we lean into customer service with our guys.
And that's exactly what you have to do.
Yeah.
Because this town's big on reputations.
I had a customer tell me we're the Chick-fil-A of HVAC.
It's not, you know, politicians get elected by their name.
Right.
Businesses, it's on their reputation.
For sure.
So you've got to build that reputation. And a lot of people, you know, are happy that I do lots of things. A lot of people are like, you're never in the office. So, you know, it's a double-edged sword. But I've got a great team. It's just like you were telling me earlier what a great team you had.
Absolutely.
I've got a great team, and my wife is my business manager who runs the office. And you know, without those people, and it's tough sometimes, especially after the pandemic.
Oh, for sure.
Because lots of people change jobs. But you know, Lexington. I've always said this to people about Lexington. I've traveled to all 50 states. I travel all over the world doing diabetes. And I say Lexington's a great place to raise a family.
Mm-hmm.
Lexington's a great place to raise kids. It's not the greatest place if you're 24 years old and single.
Right.
It is that's a Louisville or a Cincinnati or
more of a city.
Yeah. Lexington's a great place to raise a family, raise kids, build a small business, because Lexington's a small business capital. I mean, it really is. It's a small business capital. We don't have major players. You know, Toyota, well, that's actually in Scott County.
Right.
When you say IBM, well, Lexmark is a shadow of its former self,
For sure.
but still a major employer. The largest employer in this town is UK.
Yeah.
And UK that means it's government. And Frankfurt,
we're a medical community.
We're a medical community, but I got to tell you, Jamie, Lexington's got to watch itself, because there are more and more medical moving into the smaller towns. My parents are both from Eastern Kentucky. They're from Appalachian.
Mm-hmm.
And Lexington's where you came to go to the doctor.
Yeah.
Lexington's where you came to go to the hospital, go shopping.
Yeah.
That's not the case anymore.
No.
All these places have great medical facilities. And the helicopters that you see come in to UK and every place else, that's a real dire emergency.
For sure.
So we've got to watch. Lexington cannot afford to sit still. You know, in business or in a town, you don't grow and you sit still and you die.
Right.
Or you grow and you prosper.
Well, it's like a shark. You got to keep swimming.
And I thank you, or Dory in the movie.
Yeah.
And I got to tell you, I grew up here, so I respect the horse farms. I respect what makes Lexington such a beautiful place. Keeneland, flying into Blue Grass.
Yeah.
It's gorgeous.
It's one of my favorite things to do.
But on the same token, we have got to either figure out who we are or who we're not. I mean, Lexington's now grown to the county line south.
Yeah.
I mean, I actually now live in Nicholasville.
I
I can see Lexington.
Yeah.
I can almost see your house.
Yeah.
I can see Lexington, And I have a Lexington mailing address, but I actually am domiciled in Jessamine County because that's where I had to go to get the lot, the
Land that you wanted. Yeah.
And that's okay because I drive into, I still own property. I still pay 3 property taxes in Lexington. I still
pay one that's about 3 times as big as it should be.
So, you and me both. So, an acre on Nichols Hill Road, you can imagine what I pay in property tax.
So I got 27 trucks on the road. You imagine what I pay in vehicle taxes and fuel.
So the scenario is we have to all make sure we're moving in the right direction, and we can't. I started in the insurance business way back in the late 70s, early 80s, and at one time there was a philosophy that you can't do business as usual, and I think that's been a good philosophy of mine. Right. Whatever you think you're doing tomorrow is wrong.
Right. You got to stretch. You always got to be stretching
and change and be adaptable. And that's tough for an old man. I'm gonna shock you. Not really. I'm not gonna shock you. But I turned 67 years old in May.
Okay.
So I'm an old man. At least my wife tells me that on a regular basis. She's 11 years younger than me, so she tells me I'm an old man on a regular basis. But so when you're past 50, you get kind of accustomed to doing things the same way.
Hold on. I just turned 49 last month.
Congratulations. Stay there.
Yeah.
And you've got to make sure that you're looking forward. I think Lexington has to do the same thing. Now, I've got my own opinions. The baseball stadium should have been downtown. Shouldn't have been out there on Broadway.
Great, right behind Rupp Arena.
It would have been great, but then the Town Branch Park sounds like when it comes to fruition, it sounds like it's.
Well, that whole distillery district, Barry McNeese, God bless him. I mean, he invested his life in that place, and it took it 10 years longer than it should have. But man, is it taking off. And now you can't find a parking space.
And so any growing community has to have a strong downtown.
Yeah.
And Lexington has invested, I would say, $1 billion, millions, I don't know how much, in its downtown.
Well, it was dying. When I first came to Lexington, when I first moved here, because I was a student, but I would go back home. So I moved here at the end of 97, beginning of 98. And we would go to Cheapside and we would walk to McCarthy's after Cheapside got a little bit crowded. And it was a blackout.
Nothing in between.
Nothing. Yeah. And that's a 3-block walk into downtown.
And it sounds like you drank too much, by the way, Jamie. But or maybe back then. So you're right. There was an exodus out of downtown. Sears used to be downtown, moved to Fayette Mall. Yeah, there was an exodus of downtown. When I was a kid, you went downtown and got your clothes. Okay, when I was a small child. It happens in cycles. So we reinvested in downtown. We reinvented downtown. We continue to reinvent downtown. But we can't forget about the outlying area.
Mm-hmm.
Take art, for example. Okay? We've got a lot of art downtown. We've got a lot of museums downtown. We need to come south with that too. We need to have art performance. Our partnership with the Fayette County Schools on art ought to be bigger than what it is. Both of my girls went to SCAPA, the School for Performing Arts. It doesn't have a good performance place.
No.
It's using Beeler Auditorium at Lafayette. And I remember Mrs. Beeler. She was a teacher when I was a young child. So that's not enough. If we're going to build that, we've got to put the stuff behind it. Now, most people say Stewart Perry wouldn't know art if it hit him in the back of the head, and they're right.
Yeah.
But I recognize how important that is to a vibrant, growing community.
Well,
so I served on the arts board.
Yeah.
I served on the arts board 2 or 3 times.
Yeah.
Camden Skidmore's the head of, I don't know if you know Camden, but he's the chairman of the arts board right now. And Camden's the same way. He's a good friend of mine. He used to live in my neighborhood. Camden, if you're listening, you don't know art either, but you do know how important it is.
Well, that's it.
So, we all have to realize you don't have to all be Stewart Perry. Some people, people say, why do you do what you do for diabetes? Well, I have type 2 diabetes and it's all through my family. I had a son that I lost who had type 1 diabetes. But, I tell people, why do I advocate? I do it because I can stand up for people who can't or won't stand up for themselves. And that's no different than this community. People have to get involved.
Well, that's part of why I'm doing this podcast is because there's a lot of people in this community that are involved that people don't realize. Like in the last week where I've been prepping for this, I've talked to a few, friends, family that know who you are, right, but don't really know you. And I've asked,
Anybody didn't like me?
nobody that volunteered it.
Yeah. You talk to the right people.
That's it. But, like I said, most people know you're one of the largest state farm agents in town, and that's where it stops. But you've done so much good work for this community and for nonprofits and nationally for diabetes. So I'm trying to shine a light on that kind of stuff.
Well, that's kind of you. I appreciate you shining a light on me. I'd much rather you shine a light on the things that I've helped do.
Well, what
I
I'm
didn't
trying
do
to
anything by myself.
I'm trying to do to introduce people that I know personally or that I'm getting to know or want to know that are doing things, because a lot of people don't realize these things are being done. I was doing some research for the show. You realize less than 3% of the population make up the volunteer community?
Oh, yeah, I do.
So 97% of the people in this town are just living in it.
And Jamie, this is a podcast.
Yeah.
And I would dare say that less than 10% of people my age listen to podcasts.
Probably right.
The people that listen to podcasts are people that are my daughter's age.
Yeah.
My 26-year-old daughter and my 22-year-old daughter. So if you're listening to an old man, get involved, because that's what we're finding. What we're finding is the youth are not, they're getting involved in different ways, but we still need them to do the hands-on involvement. They're buying stuff because of what it does for the environment, or they're taking jobs, or they're doing stuff because of that. And that's great. And I think that's something we didn't do. Okay? You're 49. I'm going to put you in. We didn't do, but the younger people need to be involved. Somebody has to run the parades.
Well, it's interesting.
Somebody has to come out and
There's
help.
an age gap, right? And I'm in the trades. We do heating, cooling, electrical generators. I'm a master electrician and a master HVAC. So everybody who works here is either an apprentice or a journeyman. Well, we've got several guys in their 40s.
I got a whole bunch of jokes about that.
Yeah. Several guys in their 40s. We have almost no employees in their 30s. And then we've got 25 and under. I got a 19-year-old kid that works for me that made $60,000 last year because he's willing to bust it. He gets out there and shows up every day, never calls in sick. He's a workhorse. His little brother just graduated high school early, so he could come here at 17 to work here. I sent him off to Generac training. He's got one of the highest level of generator certifications in Fayette County, and he turned 18 last week.
Jamie, I don't want to speak ill of our colleges, okay? Yeah. But I got to tell you, I've hired people that have college degrees, and they're coming out thinking they should earn six-figure incomes, and the jobs aren't there.
But when I went to high school, that's what the guidance counselor told you to do. Go get a liberal arts degree. It doesn't matter what it is. You're going to come out and you're going to get into the professional world and you're going to make $100,000 a year. And that was in 1993 when I graduated, 31 years ago. And it's not changed. So in Fayette County, pre-COVID, I haven't done it since COVID, they actually had me come in and talk to the different high schools about jobs in the trades. And I loved it. The lady that was in charge of it, I said, how real do you want me to be with these young men and women? And she goes, you can limit your speech to 2 F-bombs. And I did, I got real with the kids and I told them, I always closed my speech with, this is a very valuable industry. They're never going to outsource jobs in the trades. It's not going to India. It's not going to be converted to AI. People need to come into your house to work on your furnace, right? That's going to be there. But a face or a neck tattoo or a gauge or any of the things that, you might think are cool when you're 19 years old, that's a career decision, right? For the rest of your life, you've limited yourself to places that's acceptable. And in public service, be it, going in residential homes or things of that nature, a lot of folks don't want to see that, so that's a real negative. So I encourage those kids, if you want to get that kind of stuff, make sure you can pull your sleeve over it. Let's pull it down where we can hide it. You can be you, but you need to be able to turn that into a professional at one point. Remember Bill Farmer with HCI Tax that, we're friends with for years.
Oh yeah, the guy that beat me when I ran.
The guy that I wouldn't have bring that. I wouldn't have, but he was.
He's in Vegas now, so he's probably not listening.
Yeah, you know what? He's still a friend on Facebook. But last time I asked, he had 14 tattoos now. And you could completely, Bill Farmer, all Looney Tunes characters. And every one of them he can hide,
I'm sorry.
And he's your age,
I have a discriminatory feeling about tattoos.
Yeah.
And I always told my offspring that as long as I was funding them, they would not have tattoos.
I'm the same.
So
You know what? But I respect someone's right to do it.
that's their.
If you want to do that, hey, I
and
respect that.
it's
That's
much more. It's much more common than it was
For sure.
when I was a young man. When I was a young man, people in the Navy had them. You know, that's
yeah,
it.
It was military.
But, you know, I mean, I have hired people. I always said I wouldn't hire anybody with tattoos, and then I have hired them
I say, I don't think I have.
because I have. I've hired them, and you know, now you can't tell them not to. You can't say you can't show these.
I would say 97% of my staff has tattoos.
Yeah.
So,
So you can't say you can't tell people
Yeah.
that they have to hide them. You know, so that's okay. You know, just like there's certain questions you can't ask.
like
when you
Lexington
interview.
has to evolve, you and I have to evolve.
Yeah,
Right?
well, I know I'm still a caveman. I can't help it. So, you know, but we have to have, you know, the volunteerism in a place like Lexington, because it's not big. I mean,
Yeah.
it's a small town. You still walk down Main Street and see 3 people you know.
Oh, for sure. I can't go out to dinner without seeing
That's
5
exactly right. I always say I get on an airplane, and if I don't know somebody, there's something wrong.
But the
And-
world is small. Like, I was in Paris, France for the Millennium Celebration, 99 to 2000. We were going up the escalator at the Louvre Museum. Coming down the escalator is somebody that I knew that went to Transylvania. Had no idea they were going to be there at that place in time.
15 years ago, Ralph Kohler and I were walking down Fifth Avenue in New York City, and somebody walked up and said, "What in the world is Ralph Kohler and Stewart Perry doing in New York City?" I said, "Ralph, how many people are in this town?"
Yeah.
So yeah, and you're right. The world is small, but Lexington's exceedingly small. So where I was going, Jamie, was volunteerism is like a conveyor belt. I mean, people get off of it for one reason or
Oh, yeah.
another.
Well, I say there's
And-
250 people that moved this community. But
And
that 250 people
You got to
ebbs and
keep putting them
flows.
on. Business Lexington has got in the back of it, just like the Lane Report, just like Chamber Newsletter, you know, kudos, people send in stuff. That must have been 40 people. I knew too.
Oh, wow.
You know, I said, that shows that things are changing, and that's a good thing.
Yeah.
But when you go do a volunteer thing and it's the same people, you go, hey, we need more people. You know, you talked about the Lexington Forum. A Lexington Forum is a great group. It's still around, even though you didn't kill it as president. You know who's never served as president of the Lexington Forum?
You.
Me.
Yeah.
You know why? I never would commit to getting up that early every month. Okay?
Yeah. It was a challenge.
So the Lexington Forum ought to have a couple hundred people every month,
Oh, for sure.
because it is a healthy discussion of issues.
Mhm.
It meets early in the morning before people go to work, 7 o'clock, 7:30 in the morning. And then they're out of there by 8 o'clock and they get to work by 8 or 8:30. But it doesn't. And there's a lot of people like me in there, okay? Who, when it originally started, everybody in there was under 30. And now I would say that there's very few under 30 that are there.
I was 27 or 28 when I was president, and I was the youngest president that I remembered. And then Catherine Evelyn was right behind me, or vice versa, I forget. But one of the initiatives I
Those
did,
kids are graduating from college.
I know,
They're
I
getting
know.
old.
I'm going to have Adam on at some point. I'm planning to anyway, because you know it's funny. You know, Adam and I have known each other since college, and who'd have thought that the two of us would be running the 2 largest solar companies in the entire state of Kentucky, you know, 25 years later. So, but
Well, Adam says it's just the glow coming off of it. It's not really the sun. It's just that Adam glow
No,
that powers those things.
don't ever speak publicly after Adam.
No.
He's
I've done that.
Yeah.
But he was young.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, he did the ribbon cutting here with Jim Gray when I cut the ribbon at this building in 2017. And he announced, he was emceeing it for me, and he, you know, brought me to the microphone and did this bio of me real quick. My wife leaned over and said, had I not married you before, I would after Adam's speech, you know, so. But going back to the
I
forum.
remember his commercial when he was sitting on the
Yes,
desk in the front yard when he ran for city
Yeah,
council.
but when I was president of the forum, we started a diversity initiative trying to get more diversity on the board because, you know, we wanted people of color and of any color, right? You know, we actually put together wanted posters we came up
I
with
remember
10
that.
people.
Yep.
10 people we wanted to go after, and we got one of the 10 to get involved. And you know, in doing this podcast, I want to make sure that we're looking at people of all ages and all colors and, you know, social.
But you know why that is? Nobody wants to come because of what they are. They want to come
Yeah,
because of
yeah.
who they are.
Yeah.
And I think it's completely unfair to go to somebody because they're black and ask them to serve on something.
Yeah.
So,
But how do you get different perspectives, right? You know
well,
what I mean?
that's right. And well, for one thing, many of the organizations I'm on have diversity committees.
Well, I'll give you a great example. I was the only white male board member on the board of Lexington's African American Forum. And I served on that for about 3 years. It was John Cole's group.
Yeah.
They
I
used
know
to
John
throw-
well.
Yeah.
John and Debbie.
Yeah.
It wasn't John, it was Debbie's group. What are you going
Yeah, basically. But they used to throw that huge party Martin Luther King Day weekend.
Yeah.
And it was so much fun. Went to that for
And the
years.
Cool Jazz Festival.
And the Cool
They
Jazz
still
Festival.
run that.
Yeah, and I think the Cool Jazz still happens, but I don't think they do the forum.
I don't think so.
After COVID, so many of those things changed. But I know my wife was making fun of me the year that we got married. I was on the board and they brought me up there, and there's 12 board members, I think, and I'm the white guy, right, on the board. And she said, you stood out like a whiteboard up against a blank wall, but it's, you have to.
I don't know how many boards I've served on with PG peoples over the years.
Well, that's it. But that's the, trying to really get that diversity in there, you have to go after people. And I know nobody wants to be chosen because they're, color orientation, but, how do you approach diversity if you don't approach it from that light?
Well, I disagree with a lot of the ways this country's moving and saying that we don't want to look at diversity and make sure diversity is where it needs to be. I disagree with that. I know this isn't a political podcast, but I disagree with that. I think that some people need a leg up. Some people need a little more than others. And whether that's black or whether that's impoverished or whether that's female or whether that's gay or whether that's trans, nobody should be discriminated against. I don't know about you, but all money is green.
Yeah, for sure.
I never discriminated in my business because all money is green.
Absolutely.
And so, but people are people and there are people who don't understand. But, Jamie, it's tough. I can't name you 10, 26-year-olds. Okay?
Well, one of my questions.
You tend to run with your own.
Yeah. So one of my questions for you was going to be is, in doing this, I want to highlight good people, but I also want to highlight a few up and comers, right? So do you know anybody in Lexington under 40 that's someone to watch, that's someone that's doing things?
Jamie Clark.
I'm 49, brother.
Adam England.
He's a year older than me. So I think Adam turns 50 this year.
There's some. The Lexington Young Professionals group has ebbed and flowed.
Right.
Because some of the people that started it are no longer.
Yeah. Well, you have to evolve.
And frankly, when you're an old white man, I am a member of a protected class. I'm an old white man with glasses and a mustache. Okay.
Yeah.
When you're an old guy like me, 26-year-olds look like 12-year-olds.
Yeah.
And 30-year-olds look like 12. I mean, it's hard for me to say, that I've got a couple people in my office that work for me that I think are, my wife looked at me and said, "You realize he's 28 years old?" I said, "I thought he was 35."
Yeah.
And then I've got another one that's in his 20s, and I thought he was 16. So, it's difficult. Are there up and comers? I'm sure. I'm sure there are. There are people who are the third generation. I'm going to give you a good example, and I know you don't care if I say names on this, but Brian McLaughlin was one of the guys that ran with us, and Brian's a little older than me, and helped us do these events and stuff. He helped with the Christmas parade. Brian's son, Michael, do you know Michael? Mm-hmm. Michael McLaughlin, to me, is a young kid.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
But Michael's not. Michael's your age.
Yeah, Michael's a little older than me.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, we're actually friends. It took me a second.
So you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
So to me, Michael's a kid.
Yeah.
But, Michael's got kids.
Michael's Bill Farmer's cousin, right?
Well, we say that.
Okay.
They're not.
I know they're
we say
close.
that.
Well, and he's also related to Mike Warner, who shares a building with me.
Exactly. And, you've got, to see, Bill Farmer is 64 years old. And I always thought Bill Farmer was about 54 years old. I thought Bill was old.
He's the young man in the room.
When you're 20, 3 or 4 years is a whole lot of difference.
Right.
When you're 50 and 60, 3 years are nothing. So, a guy like Bill Farmer that family business, grew up in Lexington, was born here, grew up in Lexington, went on to serve on the city council and did so many great things. He's one of those guys served on the Arts Council. I think he still does serve on the Arts Council. You've got to have people that are willing to step out. We teased earlier, I ran for office one time and the pilot light went out when I lost.
Yeah.
People come, why are you running again? Pilot light went out, and that's on me. Okay. And now at 67, I think I'm too old to run. So, we've got to have people, in Frankfurt, we've got to have people step out. She doesn't live here anymore, but Julie Babbage,
Oh, yeah.
Bob Babbage's daughter,
Yeah.
she now lives in Louisville, but Babbage co-founder is in Lexington. Bob has got a number of people working for him that are going to be leaders in this town.
Bob's another one that I want to get on the show if he's watching.
Well, have you got 2-3 hours?
Yeah, Bob actually helped deter my course. About 2003 or 4, I was very interested in politics. I was very interested in becoming a lobbyist. And Bob pointed some things out. And anyway, I want to have him on the show, but Bob's the reason I'm not a lobbyist. And ironically,
Bob's the reason I'm not a lobbyist.
Well, ironically, I'm one of the lead lobbyists for the solar industry in the state of Kentucky. And Bob was my opponent. And we beat him 3 out of 4 years, but they won the 4th time. So
let me tell you, I traveled with Bob Babbage to a diabetes meeting one time, and he had 2 cell phones. And this is back before you never saw anybody have 2 cell phones.
yeah,
And he was going from one to the other. We were trying to have dinner, and he was going from one to the other, and I was with him for 2 days. And I looked at him and said, Robert, I'm just going to tell you, I've known you since you were to work for UK. And I said, I was really considering maybe giving this insurance gig up at some point and becoming a lobbyist because I really like it. And I said, you just watching I ain't gonna ask you your opinion, just watching you. I said, I ain't gonna do it. So I'm a volunteer. Which means I consider it every day, every session. I don't have to go to Frankfurt. It's a good session.
yeah,
okay.
I would agree with that.
So, they meet. What is it they meet? 1 year for 30 days and every other year for 60 days.
Yeah.
And I always said they need to meet every 60 years for 2 days. But I like doing it volunteer because there's nobody you have to be abiding to except yourself.
You're not appeasing anyone.
And that's what you're doing
Yeah.
with the lead. But when you're a paid lobbyist, and I gotta tell you, the lobbyists are. That's who we hire to protect us from who we elect.
Well,
that's who lobbyists are. And everybody gives them a
a
bad name. But I gotta tell you, without them, we couldn't have accomplished in this state what we need to accomplish. And we couldn't accomplish in this country, even though if you look at Washington right now, you can't tell, and yes, there is an R in it, you can't tell that anything's going on. I had a congressperson look at me during that whole, I ran into him in the hallway in DC, and during that whole speaker mess, he said, well, we'll screw this up soon.
Mm-hmm.
He said, we can't help it. We just have to. And I said, well, how long are you going to stay up here? He said, I don't know. But he said, we're going to screw this up quick. So, this gets back to volunteerism. And that's why you brought me in here. You saw like fancy stuff about mentorship and stuff. Volunteerism, for me, is a passion, particularly about things I care about, such as Lexington, such as diabetes, such as, I'm a member of an organization called 100 Good Men. Now, why they only accept men, I don't know.
Yeah.
But I didn't start it.
Right.
We're raising $100,000 for the Heart Association this year. I'm a heart attack survivor. I don't know if you knew that or
I
not.
did not know that.
2017, I had a heart attack. And I didn't know I was having a heart attack. Most people said I didn't have a heart, so there's no way I could have a heart attack. I won't tell the whole story because it'll take longer than we have, but ended up having the heart attack in the emergency room at Central Baptist.
Oh, wow.
And Hal Skinner, cardiologist, saved my life. I've got 2 stents. I had 100% blockage in my widowmaker.
Oh, wow.
And 90% blockage in another arm.
You're very fortunate.
All of my numbers were good, however.
Really?
My wife is still mad at my endocrinologist because I had never had it. You're talking to a guy who's never been in the hospital since he's been born.
Wow.
And I had a heart attack. I'm a heart attack survivor. So Heart Association, they do great work. So the Heart Ball's coming up March 1st. They always sell it out. It's always
that's
a great
big.
event. And I've done the Heart Walk. Lisa Edwards, who runs the gala, she also used to work for the Diabetes Association, the American Diabetes
Oh, yeah,
Association.
yeah,
You
yeah.
remember?
Yeah.
When she was here. And so, I continue to get involved in things that I think are good. And sometimes, I'm on a board nobody's heard of called the Prevention Research Institute. You know what that board does? It develops the curriculum for everybody, all 50 states, the military, to have people go through when they've had DUIs and
Wow.
when they've had drug convictions. And talk about something important.
Yeah.
It's a nonprofit and it's based here in Lexington. It's Doug Alexander. I know you've heard of Doug, is the president, and he called me and asked me to serve on it. So I'm still on a lot of committees at the chamber. I'm on the local government committee at the chamber, or whatever the government committee is at the chamber. And I still do a lot of, I was on the chamber board a long time ago, not interested in that again, but not anybody should be, but,
Well, you've done your time, right? You served.
I
I used to say that the perfect length of time to be on a nonprofit board was 3 years, unless you're going through the ranks of Treasury Secretary, Vice President. If you're doing that, obviously there's a different commitment. But
kind of shoots that thing down, me being on EEI board since '94.
I know, but I have found, or at least in my experience, that it's kind of like company and fish. It starts to smell after 3 days. After about 3 years, especially if you're raising money for the same charity, you're going to your same resources, and it runs its course,
Except when I started, you had to go knock on doors and ask for a check.
Mm-hmm.
Now you can do it on social media, do it online,
Venmo,
and Venmo and everything else. And so things are, sometimes things are easier. Raising money is still hard
It's still hard.
because you got to get in people's pockets.
The scary thing is, having been politically active and having been, the Dream Factor is probably the organization I was on that I would do most deserving, right? Sending critically ill children to Disney and do wonderful things. It was very rewarding. And I actually rolled off that board largely because my girls were getting older, and the more often that I was seeing some of these kids and what they were suffering with, I left more than one board meeting crying, and going home and scooping my kids up,
My friend, you've said a mouthful.
Yeah.
When we started, I was on the committee that went and met with the kids in the hospital. And I walked out of the rooms bawling.
Yeah.
I had a kid, one of the first rooms we did was a kid, and he's at the old UK hospital.
Yeah.
Air conditioning wasn't working. The old UK hospital. And he said, I'd like a bike. And I looked at his mother and said, how many kids do you have? She said, 6.
Wow.
I said, if you get one, Ralph Coleman and I went outside, and I said, Ralph, if you give this boy a bike, he's never going to see it.
Right.
We bought 6 bikes.
Yeah.
It's, I went and saw a kid one time whose mother said, well, he missed his last cancer treatment. I said, why? She said, I couldn't get a ride down here. I said, here's my card.
Yeah.
Call me. I said, Ralph, I can't do this. I'll raise money.
Yeah.
I run the event. When we first started the galas, and now still goes on. We first started the gala.
Well, I was part of the group that moved the gala from Spindletop out to R.J. Corman's, and I guess it's moved again now.
Well, I tell you, when it started, we were at Mayfair Manor.
Oh,
We were
yeah.
in a parking lot.
Well,
We were in a parking lot out behind Ralph Colburn's. It wasn't his house now where he lives, but it wasn't them.
the gala in like 04, it was raising like $12,000 an event. And when I got off, it was raising like $100,000. And I helped influence that. I'm proud of that. But I also brought some new blood with me. That was one thing, because I was one of the younger guys on the board at that time. Because the Dream Factory, there's a lot of long-term people on that board that really care about it. And Ralph
Richards,
and the Ishmaels, the Richardsons, and wonderful people.
Terry
Hagen, God love that man. If there's anybody going to heaven, it's Terry Hagen. But
only because his wife's going to give you that. Be on her coattails.
But when I was there, I pretty aggressively brought some people my age onto it because I was one of the youngest guys in the room. There's 33 board members, and I was the youngest guy in the room by 20 years. So the next 3 or 4 presidents after me were all people that I brought onto that board. But the interesting thing about raising money for sick kids was hard. Raising money for politicians is crazy easy. You call 10 people and a Rolodex and you got $10,000. It struck me, having to beg for money for children, but for politicians, people are tripping to write off the check.
But you say that, having to raise money for children. However, it's you and your reputation and the organization's reputation.
Yeah.
You can raise money for good politicians. You can't raise money for bad politicians.
Well,
So I know people that have run for office that never should have run for office, and they couldn't raise any money. And
this last
that's-
election cycle, I mean, you got to wonder what the powers that be that push candidates out in front. I mean, there was some very questionable, you know.
I said when I came in here, I wasn't going to talk politics, so because I had my own opinions, and
Yeah.
you know, I'm always right. It's a curse. I've learned to live with being right all the time, Jimmy.
Right,
But
right.
it's incumbent upon everybody who lives, works, eats, drinks, sleeps, breathes in this community to make it a better place and leave it a better place, whether you're moving, whether you live here until you die, whatever that is, it's incumbent on everybody to do something better. My father started a State Farm agency in 1961. I worked for him before I became an agent and became his partner in 1983. And my father died almost 3 years ago now. He built it, and then I built it even bigger than he ever dreamed it could be. Yeah, sweat equity, whatever you want to call it. I mean, you run a business, you know what I'm talking about.
60, 80 hours a week.
It's right. When you run a business, I've left there at 7 o'clock, left the office at 7 o'clock at night, you know. But it's not just about that. It's about making the place that your business is, or making the place you live, a better place. And that's what it's all about. Have I done things that maybe didn't make Lexington as good a place as something else would have been? Yeah, maybe.
Yeah.
But I didn't know that at the time.
Right. You tried. The effort was there.
The stuff, I mean, my younger daughter rides at Auburn, like you know. By the way, University of Kentucky does not have an NCAA level equestrian team.
That's ridiculous.
Should.
That's ridiculous.
Mitch Barnhart, you need to make it an NCAA level
Make it a
equestrian
priority.
team. But Lexington is just, it's such a wonderful place. It deserves better. Lexington is a microcosm of the world. You know, everybody's screaming about climate change. Everybody wants to preserve the snail garner. Everybody wants to, you know, we want to preserve
Our
the
water
trees,
quality here in town.
water quality, everything. Lexington is a microcosm of that. You know, we want to preserve the farmland. I agree. We want to make it a better place for business, so that when our children get out of college, they don't have to leave.
Yeah.
You know, the diabetes scenario. Your daughter should not have to take a job that she doesn't want just to get benefits.
Yeah.
Your daughter should be able to do anything that she wants to do. If that's to be an artist, she should be able to do anything she wants to do and have the health insurance and the benefits she needs to be able to do that. That's the kind of thing I fight for globally.
Oh man, I could go down the rabbit hole on that.
I'm not just national anymore. That's the thing that my organization fights for globally. Lexington is a microcosm of that.
Yeah.
We've got to fight to make sure that complacency, it's not anybody doing anything wrong, it's complacency. It's people, oh, somebody else will do that. It'll be fine.
3% of the community are on all the volunteer boards. 97% of the people are just living here.
People have got to get involved.
They do,
People
absolutely.
have got to, and
Well,
it's
that's
not
part of
about me, and it's not about you. I mean, you know, we saw, I keep bringing him up, but we saw Ralph Kohler win $10,000 for Children's Hospital. the other day.
that's cool.
7 brew.
Yeah.
So, you know, that was because Ralph had a network of people that he pushed and pushed and pushed. You talk about raising money.
Yeah.
Ralph said, every day go on and vote for me. Okay. Ralph didn't do that for Ralph. He
Yeah.
did that for the Children's Hospital. I was on the Children's Miracle Network board before it became the UK Children's Hospital board. Yes, I know. I've been on a bunch of them.
Yeah.
So, you know, it is incumbent upon people to see something, to see that void, to step in. You sold insurance for a while.
I
You
did.
know what I'm talking about. You look at somebody's insurance portfolio and you go, you don't have an umbrella? Or you realize you don't have coverage for this? Now, let's talk about it. Do you need it? You need it. Okay, well, here's what it's going to cost, and here's the policy to serve that need. It's no different. Lexington has needs, and you jump in and you fill that need, and you have to make sure that the organization you're doing is doing a good thing for the need. Lexington has got homeless population. We've had a lot of talk about that.
You know, Jenny Ramsey says there's over 70 homeless camps in Lexington right now.
I don't doubt that. In the 50s, you know how they handled that?
Yeah.
They put them in a boxcar instead of a Louisville. It's serious.
Yeah.
That's not what we do now.
Yeah.
Lexington has a need in housing, affordable housing. You know,
So
there's all kinds of things. All I'm saying is pick up the phone, pick up the email, pick up an internet, and get online. Help. Do something. Get involved. That's what I did. And I might have, if I had just stayed in insurance, I might have been more successful than I am.
Yeah,
But I don't know. I don't know that I'd want to be.
But you also help grow your business through your network, right? So I mean, it's beneficial.
Yeah.
So when people come to me and they ask, how did you grow your business? I said, I volunteered. I was in a lot of places. I was an ambassador for Chamber of Commerce for 3 years and met tons and tons of people. Which if you want to get involved, that's place number one, right?
It's the very first ambassador.
Were you really? So I was ambassador 01, 2, and 3, I think, somewhere in there. But I will say that kind of catapulted me to getting involved with community people that I wouldn't have been involved in just because that group, the ambassador board, I think it's one of the most, it's a launch pad for volunteerism, And
I'll tell you what else, Jamie. You asked me a question and now I just came up with the answer.
okay.
Leadership Lexington.
Yeah.
That's the other place that young people are getting in. Some of them are a little older than that, but a lot of them are very young. And Leadership Lexington does a lot to expose people to what's going on here.
That's one thing I've never had the opportunity to do in my career, and I've always wanted to do that in Leadership Central Kentucky. And it's just
And Leadership Kentucky.
Yeah.
There's three.
Yeah.
There's Leadership Lexington, Leadership Central Kentucky, and Leadership.
Well, you guys founded the Lexington Forum out of the first class of Leadership
I
Lexington.
did, to be truthful. I
Yeah.
didn't found it. It was a year and a half old when I joined.
Okay.
Ralph Coldiron, Bob Babbage, Doug Alexander, Larry Smith, Brad Cowgill, Susan Ehrman, and one other founded the Lexington Forum.
Okay.
And they wanted that feel of Leadership Lexington to continue.
Right.
That's why the Lexington Forum started. And it's a great group. And it's a group that works hard. You were president, you know that. I appreciate you remembering that I recruited you to be president. Because I was thinking about younger people being involved.
It was
What I did
It was at the Alice Ford Curve fundraiser that we were talking about a minute ago that you pulled me aside. Ralph and Larry were both there, and
Well, you know what? I didn't even remember Alice Lynn. I was at your fundraiser.
Yeah.
You're listening. But I'm glad I was.
it was at the banquet room above at that time, which was Sal's, and we had it was the biggest fundraiser I'd ever thrown. We had 150 people there that night, and it was a really, really good time.
Well, it's incumbent upon everybody to get involved because if not you, who? If not me, who? Who is going to stand up for somebody that can't stand up for themselves? Who is going to stand up for Lexington? I mean, Lexington is a unique place. I'll bet there's not a handful of cities around the country that have drawn an imaginary ring around the city and said you can't develop outside of it.
Oh, I'm sure.
Is that good or is that bad? We need to reevaluate that.
Yeah.
Lexington needs to constantly soul search for what the right thing is for Lexington. Certainly our traffic patterns aren't right now.
I would agree with that completely.
I mean, our traffic is horrible.
It's really bad.
Now,
King
people-
Street Road coming into Lexington is one of the biggest nightmares.
Now, people from Chicago tell me our traffic is fabulous.
Well,
So
Atlanta
it's all
says the same thing.
perspective. It's all perspective. But you name me another major city that didn't use the interstate as part of their major thoroughfares.
Oh, I know.
We did. We said, put it back out there. And by the way, you can't develop around it.
Yeah. Well,
So
now they are.
that was a mistake made in the past.
Right. That was-
Let's not make those mistakes in the future. We're under this sewer and water
Yeah,
thing from the federal government because the mistakes made in the past.
for sure.
If you're going to work and do things for the better of Lexington, let's make sure we do them right. Let's make sure we do what needs to be done instead of what's popular. I'm never worried about what's popular. If you don't believe it, I can give you a list of people that don't like me. Okay? I mean,
I've got a list of those myself.
I don't want to do what's popular. I want to do what's right.
Yeah.
And I want to encourage others to do what's right. And I've never considered myself a mentor. You've been very very kind to me today. But if I had to be, that would be the message. Get involved, do what needs to be done, and do it the right way.
Yeah.
Don't come back and have to redo it. Do it the right way the first time. And I constantly look at, we all tend to look right here.
Mm-hmm.
I'm always trying to look out here.
Having
look
peripheral
out
vision
here.
is rare.
And look out here and see what might happen and stop it before it does happen. That's why we have a merged government.
Right. Well, and that's one of the best parts about Lexington,
And it was because Bob Stevens, who was the county judge, agreed to give up power in order to merge that government.
Well, and making it nonpartisan. I think that's one of the best things. We talked with Cruiser, Linda Gordon, unless she's changed it, was a registered Republican,
She still is.
Yeah. And 99% of the population probably thinks she's a Democrat, So
I think she's a grandmother.
yeah,
They don't know whether she's a Democrat or a Republican.
for sure.
And that's what you should be.
Well, in that role, for sure.
Ideologies have no place in politics. Now,
Yeah.
that's Stewart Perry talking. We should abolish parties. I never voted for a party in my life. I voted for people. People make laws, parties don't. And that's how we need to be. We once again, we got on politics again,
Politics,
Jay.
I know. That's right.
And the issue is the politics of Lexington is people.
I agree.
In my diabetes work, my standard close is as long as we continue to put people before profit, we'll be fine.
Right.
If we put profit before people, we're losing it. That's what's going on in our healthcare
With
system.
big pharma, for
And
sure.
the same thing, just big pharma, big insurance.
Yeah, I agree.
I'm an insurance agent.
I know.
Big insurance, baby. Okay, they own everything.
Well, I mean, Humana is kicking us off because they're going straight Medicare and Medicaid. You can't. In Kentucky, we've only got like 2 options now for healthcare. And trying to attract new employees when your healthcare is abysmal. I believe healthcare is a right. Every employee that works for me, I pay 100% of that employee's healthcare. So we don't pay for their families, because there's a point where you can.
I only pay 80%. You're good.
I pay 100% of every one of my
You're
employees.
good.
So
Yeah, I can talk all day on health insurance and healthcare and drug pricing. I can explain drug pricing to you. If you ever want to do a podcast on drug pricing,
Right.
I'll come back
yeah,
and we'll do just that and not get on anything else. We'll get that whiteboard you've got over your shoulder and I'll draw on it and you'll go, wow.
yeah,
But that's a system that's broken. Our healthcare system is broken. Our health insurance system is broken. Lexington can't afford to be broken.
Mhm.
Lexington cannot afford to go backwards. We have to go forward. That doesn't mean we have to drive a bulldozer through Calumet.
right.
Okay? But what it means is we have to do what's smart and sometimes unpopular, but what's smart and what's right for our community. You can't have NIMBY syndrome. I'm president of Homeowners Association 2 or 3 times. Started one. Not in my backyard syndrome.
Yeah.
Doesn't always work.
Yeah.
Okay.
I
So,
sell solar panels. Homeowners associations with me are well acquainted.
used to be we outlawed satellite dishes
Mhm.
because they were big as your desk.
Yeah.
I've
I've got one out on my farm if you want.
The National Satellite Association sued in Lexington, Kentucky over that.
Really?
The groundbreaking
I didn't know
lawsuit that caused them not to be able to be governed by a homeowner association was right here.
that. I didn't know that.
Okay, it's Ashmore Neighborhood Association, which is no longer in existence.
Yeah.
So I know I'm a wealth of useless information, Jay. So if you after you get through making this podcast, what you want it to look like. If there's one message that we get out of here is you got to where you are because you cared. I got to where I am because I care. People have to care. They have
More
to
people
care
care.
about our community. They have to care about things like diabetes,
Yeah.
like heart disease, like cancer. They have to care, and not just because it affected them
Right.
or their loved one. They've got to care because it's the right thing to do. And you know what? Whether there's a heaven or hell, I believe there is, but some people don't. Whether there's a heaven or hell, when you've ended your days, if you've done more good than bad and done the right thing when it's necessary, I think you'll be okay. And I think that's where we all need to get to.
Well, and I think that in my time of knowing you, that you can probably lay your head at bed tonight with feeling real good about that right there. Because I know you've done a lot of good in this community.
I tried.
Well, and that's the whole point of this podcast is to pull the curtain back on the people that are we're trying to shine a light on good people doing great things. And I really appreciate you being on the podcast this time. And
Thanks for inviting me.
we'll have you on. I got about 25 people in mind that I'm going after right now.
I would much rather have paid than do it.
Yeah.
I had a good time.
Yeah. Well, thank you for your time. I greatly appreciate you being here.
Bye. Thanks, Jay.